What happens when you are born perfect, when the world looks at you and tells you that you have everything anyone could ever want? But then, that very perfection, the thing that everyone praises, becomes your prison? This is the story of Stella Tennant. She was aristocracy. She was fashion royalty. She was, for a time, the very definition of what the world told her to be. And yet, that same world that lifted her so high was also the one that crushed her. Karl Lagerfeld, the emperor of Chanel, once called her the Coco Chanel of the 1990s. That was no small statement. Stella redefined beauty at a time when fashion was ruled by glossy perfection and polished glamour. With her sharp, angular cheekbones, her buzz cut, and her androgynous strength, she forced the fashion world to forget what it thought it knew about femininity. She challenged every assumption. She didn't just model clothes. She made people question ideas of beauty itself. And the strangest part was this: she made it look effortless, at least from the outside. "I mean, I love doing the shows," she once explained in an interview, "but when you're doing the shows in Milan and then in Paris, and I like to go to London as well and then New York, so it's quite grueling work." The cracks were not easy to see. They were hidden, almost invisible to the casual observer. But they were always there, running beneath the surface of her extraordinary career. Stella Tennant moved from a quiet sheep farm in Scotland to the most glamorous fashion campaigns in the world. She made breaking every rule look as natural as breathing. But what really happened to Stella Tennant? How did someone born with every possible advantage, wealth, beauty, talent, access, become one of fashion's most tragic losses? Was the fashion industry's golden girl, in fact, its most dangerous secret? To answer that, you have to go back to where it all began: a sheep farm in Scotland and a girl who never truly fit anywhere. The Tennant family estate in the Scottish borders was not just a farm. It was 1,500 acres of rolling green hills where aristocracy and agriculture lived side by side. This was Chatsworth House territory, the heartland of the Cavendish family, where history and hierarchy ruled for centuries. Stella's mother, Lady Emma Cavendish, was the daughter of the Duke of Devonshire, raised in one of England's most breathtaking stately homes. Her father, Tobias Tennant, was a gentleman farmer with an artistic eye and a rebellious streak. He had money and position, but he also had the courage to go against tradition. This was not just wealth. This was old money, real money, the kind that comes with titles, expectations, and an invisible map laid out before you from the moment you are born. For daughters of such families, the future usually meant finishing school, a proper marriage, charity work, and occasional appearances in society magazines like Tatler. Everything was prescribed, but Stella was never going to follow that path. Born in 1970, she seemed, even as a child, to resist everything her aristocratic bloodline expected of her. While other daughters of privilege were learning piano, practicing posture, and curtsying at society events, Stella was piercing her own nose with safety pins. At 16, she took scissors to her hair and cut it all off, leaving herself with the cropped buzz cut that would later define her. Her parents were horrified. Their friends were scandalized. But Stella felt free for the first time. She wasn't just rejecting social convention, she was rejecting the entire idea of traditional feminine beauty. This was a girl who had grown up walking through gallery halls filled with portraits of perfectly groomed ancestors. She knew exactly what she was supposed to look like, but she wanted to look like anything except that. The family hoped it was just a phase, a teenage rebellion that would pass when she went off to university. But when Stella enrolled at the Winchester School of Art to study sculpture, she doubled down. She pierced her eyebrow. She wore old men's clothing bought from thrift shops. She looked like she had wandered out of a punk club and into a lecture hall. Modelling? It wasn't even a thought. She wasn't trying to be pretty. She was trying to be herself. "I've grown up with art around me," she later explained. "I was very interested in art as a teenager and went to art school and studied sculpture at Winchester. Art inspires me to see things in a different way." Her plans were not to stand in front of cameras, but to build her own studio, to sculpt, to create art that made people think differently. But the world had other plans for her. By the early 1990s, the fashion industry was beginning to shift. The supermodel era was at its peak. Naomi, Cindy, Christy, Linda. But editors were starting to feel bored of the same glossy perfection. They wanted something new. They were searching for faces that felt raw, real, unpredictable. And then came 1993. Stephen Meisel, the legendary photographer who could make or break careers with a single photograph, was shooting for British Vogue. Meisel didn't just capture pretty faces, he created legends. He made Naomi Campbell into fire. He helped transform Linda Evangelista into a goddess. His work was poetry. When Meisel called, nobody said no. The concept that year was Anglo-Saxon attitudes, a fashion spread celebrating British beauty. But Meisel wasn't looking for beauty in the traditional sense. He was looking for something raw, something that forced people to stop flipping the pages and stare. Through a friend of a friend, Meisel's team heard whispers about an aristocratic art student with a shaved head and an attitude. They brought her in almost as an afterthought. She walked into the studio in ripped jeans and an old band t-shirt. No professional photos, no experience, no portfolio. The other models in the waiting room looked like the definition of perfection. Sleek hair, flawless makeup, practiced poses. Stella looked like she would rather be anywhere else. But the moment she entered, Meisel stopped talking. He stared at her cheekbones, her androgynous presence, her quiet but undeniable power. "She doesn't look like anyone else," he reportedly whispered to his assistant. The first shots were awkward. Stella didn't know how to pose. But Meisel saw beauty in her awkwardness. "Stop trying," he told her. "Just be." And then it happened. The camera caught something no one had ever seen before. It wasn't modelling, it was electricity. It was authenticity. Within weeks, the images were everywhere. Stella Tennant, the girl from the sheep farm, was suddenly the face every editor wanted. She didn't even have an agent. She didn't even have headshots. But she had something much more powerful. Every eye in fashion focused on her. And then came the call from Paris, from Karl Lagerfeld. Lagerfeld didn't just see a model in Stella Tennant. He saw a revolution. Chanel had always been about rebellion. Coco Chanel had freed women from corsets and given them trousers. But Lagerfeld wanted a new kind of rebellion for the 1990s. He found it in Stella. When she walked into his atelier, he studied her like an artist studies marble before carving it. He didn't just see beauty. He saw the future of Chanel. Her first Chanel campaign, shot by Lagerfeld himself, dropped like a bomb in the fashion world. Stella in a tweed suit, hair buzzed, eyes sharp as glass. She didn't just wear Chanel, she transformed it. Overnight, women everywhere were shaving their heads, trying to look like Stella. And just like that, she was everywhere. Runways, campaigns, magazine covers, Versace, McQueen, Calvin Klein, every designer wanted her contradictions. Aristocrat and rebel, elegant and raw, masculine and feminine. But behind the scenes, the cracks grew wider. Stella confessed, "When I was working full on for the first 5 years, I would do 75 shows a season. I was exhausted. The effortless look? It wasn't effortless at all. It took a village." She was famous for being natural, but natural now meant teams of people making sure she looked like she had just rolled out of bed perfectly. The irony was cruel. By the late 90s, Stella was trapped by her own success. She wasn't rebelling anymore. She was performing rebellion, and the cost on her was immense. In 1999, she married French photographer David Lasnet. She wanted family, stability, a life beyond cameras. She had 4 children, Marcel, Cecily, Jasmine and Iris. For a while, it looked like her escape. But fashion never let go. The money, the opportunities, they kept pulling her back. As she aged, another cruel truth of fashion revealed itself. The industry celebrates youth but demands it last forever. Stella aged gracefully, naturally, but the lines on her face became marks of expiration rather than character. In 2020, after 21 years, her marriage ended. Her children were grown. Her career slowed. And then came the silence of the pandemic. Back in Scotland, surrounded by the hills of her childhood, Stella found herself face to face with a question she had never truly answered. Who was she when she wasn't Stella Tennant the icon? Her family would later say gently that she had been unwell for some time. Despite the love around her, she felt unable to go on. On December the 22nd, 2020, 5 days after her 50th birthday, Stella Tennant died by suicide. The world was stunned. Here was a woman who seemed to have everything: aristocracy, success, beauty, family. But she lacked the one thing she needed most: the freedom to be imperfect. Her story forces fashion to confront a bitter truth. It celebrates uniqueness, but often destroys those who embody it. The pressure to stay perfect, to remain forever young, to never change. It is a form of slow suffocation. But Stella Tennant's legacy will never die. She changed fashion forever. She showed that beauty could look different, that strength could look fragile, that the bravest thing anyone can do is simply to be themselves. Every time someone chooses authenticity over expectation, Stella lives on. She was aristocrat and rebel, icon and human. And her life reminds us of one essential truth. Behind every perfect image, there is a human being who longs simply to be seen and loved, not for what they represent, but for who they are.